Hello, I'm Atendra Chaturvedi. In this video, we will go through the detailed process of upgrading a vSphere 6.0 deployment to the latest version of vSphere, which is vSphere 6.5. The process we will use would be to use the Update Manager server version 6.5 that we deployed in an earlier video. So we will patch an existing vSphere 6.0 installation. We will take it from vSphere version 6.0.0 to 6.0 update 2, and then we will upgrade that installation to vSphere 6.5, and we will use the Update Manager Server 6.5 process for this upgrade. So I'm back in the lab again. I'm in the vSphere web client. I'm logged into the vCenter at 192.168.0.67. There is a data center which is called pactpub-dc. There is one host that's connected that is in that data center, and that has two virtual machines that are currently not powered on. So what I want to do is to show you the update manager. So I go into 192.168.0.200. I click on update manager. What I want to do is to attach a baseline. A baseline simply means a simple set of patches or a level of compliance that is attached always to that ESXi host. So I'm going to attach a baseline which is predefined, called critical host patches. Other predefined ones, of course, are non-critical host patches, and there are some others as well. I can even create a new host baseline that can be dynamic or static in the sense that it would have a certain specific list of host patches, which would make it basically static, or it would be dynamic, in which case it would be based on like a time, so that every critical host patch, for example, as and when it is actually released, would then be part of that baseline. So we're going to keep things simple here first, and we'll delve into more detail later on, just to get an idea of Update Manager. So this Update Manager, of course, is the one that we installed earlier. It's running on the Windows 2012 R2 server, and it is attached to a Windows based vCenter. So critical host patches predefined. We're going to attach the critical host patches to this host, and it goes through that status, and it says overall compliance status is non-compliant. Now I did a scan just a little while ago, but I'm going to show you what one would do first. So the first thing to do is, after you attached your baseline, which is critical host patches, to the server 192.168.0.200, the idea is now to scan for updates. So you scan for updates to verify, and it's going through this process here, the verification process. It's scanning the server 192.168.0.200 based on the critical host patches predefined and checking on its status. And that process has completed, and the compliance status is non-compliant, which means that these patches need to be implemented on this server. Okay. Now the next thing to do would be to stage the patches, which is download the patches to the hosts you select. Once the patches are staged, remediation is faster. So I'm going to go through a process to simplify or to reduce the time of remediation, so that I could say remediate directly, and it would start doing that, but it has to stage the patches first. So while everything is up and running, I basically say I'm going to stage the patches, and the baselines which were attached were the critical host patches. I click next, and that is the correct one. None have been staged, and there are 13 patches required on that VMware ESXi version 6.0. Later on, once these patches are in, we will then do a host upgrade, and we'll upgrade this host to ESXi 6.5, but that's for later. I click on next, and these are the 13 selected objects that would be implemented. You can see that they're all part of ESXi 6.0. Obviously the earlier critical patches that are relevant to any other version are not part of it, so this is all automatic. An interesting aspect is the not last two, but this one, VMware ESXi Complete Update 1 and VMware ESXi Complete Update 2. I believe the version of ESXi that I'm running right now on that server .200 is the initial VMware ESXi 6.0 implementation. So it does not have the update 1 for version 6.0 and it does not have the update 2 for version 6.2. So the scan basically went through the whole process and did all this automatically, nothing else to do. If I want to, I can say, okay, I don't want to update it to level 2, I just want to update it to update level 1, and I could do that. But I'm just going to go through the process. So all you have to do is to basically uncheck this, right? I want to have that there as well. So I'm just going to leave them all there and select next. And it says it's one host, 192.168.0.200. I expand the baselines, and the one baseline I'm going to apply to that are the critical host patches. And this is the list of the 13 host patches that would be applied, including the complete update 1 to version 6.0 and complete update 2, because the version of 6.0 running up there is a very initial version of ESX 6.0. I click on finish, and it is going to stage the patches to the entity, which means it's going to be transferred to that host. I'm going to pause for a while until this is complete. While we're waiting for the patches to be staged, it's very useful to look at the report after the scan. So overall we are non-compliant, but then we have details. So for example, Tools Lite has been installed and is compliant. Okay, so these are all the critical severities, because that what we have said. Now some of these are obviously obsoleted and some are not applicable. For example, if you look at 5.5, it's not applicable because we're running a version 6.0. Then you can take a look at some of the other ones. These are missing and critical. So it gives you a pretty fair idea of for each and every specific patch what the issue is, and obviously what the impact will be. So when you apply these, we would have to do maintenance mode and actually do a reboot. In the meantime, the patches are still being staged. So now you can see that the patches have been staged to the entity, which is the host.200. The next step, of course, is to then remediate. So when I click on remediate, these are the patch baselines, and it's the same baseline of critical host patches, the predefined one. I click next. The target object is that server at .200, 13 patches. Next. This is the list as we saw earlier, including the complete update 1 and complete update 2. I click next. Let's look at the advanced options briefly. I could schedule this action to run later. I could give a task name, description, then give the time. I just wanted to run right away. I could also say ignore warnings about unsupported hardware devices and no longer supported VMFS data stores. Let me click on the information icon here. It says to ignore warnings about unsupported hardware devices and no longer supported VMFS data stores, select it. So the functional implications are ignoring warnings about unsupported hardware and no longer supported VMFS might cause instability, inability to boot from host, or lack of needed resources. So please be very careful about actually using it. I prefer to leave it unselected, so that in the end, whatever happens, any warnings and so on are not really ignored, and I have a chance to take a look at them and make sure that everything is actually working okay. I click next. And now we have the maintenance mode options. Okay. So before the host remediation happens, hosts might need to enter maintenance mode, which means that the VMs and the appliances must be shut down or they need to be migrated to another host in the cluster. To reduce the downtime, we can select to shut down or suspend the virtual machines and appliances before remediation. And the options are here. I've set an option at the higher level here to basically say power off virtual machines, but I have the option here to rethink that. So I'm just going to power off virtual machines, even though, as you can see, if you look up here, the 2 virtual machines on that server are actually powered off. Now, of course, in a production environment, you would not want to do that. You would want if it's a cluster, the virtual machines would be migrated. I leave the retry entering maintenance mode. and then enable patch remediation of powered on Pixie booted hosts. Of course, this is important because Pixie hooded boosts revert to their original state because their software is actually loaded into the host, into the hardware at boot time. So you obviously have to redo it, but you could also remediate the patch while the server is up and running in case it's a critical patch, because you want to be sure you are as secure as can possibly be. The option here is to save these as the default host remediation options. I like to not do that and look at this screen every time I do a remediation. I click on next, and we are going to do a host remediation. We have one patch baseline, which we know is the critical host patches predefined baseline. We know that it's only on one host, the .200 host. There are 13 patches, and we're going to remediate immediately. And what we're going to do is to power off the virtual machines, and we'll keep retrying entering maintenance mode every 5 minutes 3 times. I click on finish, and the process actually now begins. I am not going to keep this video running, so I will pause it very soon. See, the first thing it did was enter maintenance mode, so that has been completed, right? And now it's actually doing the installation. You see the installation of those patches happening. It's at 5% at this point in time, and that was done very quickly indeed because we staged the patches. So the host is still in maintenance mode, and now it is initiating a host reboot. And we can see that the host exited maintenance mode after the reboot, and it is back operational at this point in time. Now let's do a scan again. And you can see that when we did the scan again for that baseline of critical host patches predefined, the compliance status changed from red to green. So it is now compliant, which basically means that all those patches, critical patches, have now been applied for this baseline. So I'm back in the lab again, logged into 192.168.0.202. If you look at the summary description and scroll up a little bit, you will see it's running VMware ESXi 6.0. The idea is to upgrade it to version 6.5. So we click on Update Manager. We attach a baseline to it, and the upgrade baseline we apply is vSphere 6.65- baseline, which is a host upgrade. Actually, let's just go back and go to the admin view. Look at the baselines that have been defined. So what I can do is I can actually delete this baseline first for this exercise. We look at the ESXi images that have been imported, and what I can do is I can actually delete this ESXi image as well, so we can start from scratch. So the first thing to do is, we need an ESXi image. So I click on Import an ESXi image, and I click on Browse. And I am going to find that file to select, which is right here, 6.5, and I click on Open. It's uploading it. This only takes a few seconds. It's going to import the file, and we know the import is now successful, and that this image is a ESXi 6.5 standard image. The version is 6.5. I close this, and then I say I'm going to create a baseline from it. Where did it go? So here we have the ESXi image. I had to do a refresh. So that's where our image is. I now go to the compliance view. Actually, I want to create a new host baseline. I create a new host baseline by clicking on the plus. I want a host upgrade type of a baseline. The name will be vSphere 6.5 standard. The host upgrade baseline contains an ESXi image that will upgrade hosts to the selected version. Next. And this is the ESXi image to which I want to upgrade. I click on next, ready to complete. And so the baseline now contains that image, which is a host upgrade image. I go to the compliance view, and for this server that I want to upgrade, which currently, look at the summary one more time, is a 6.0 ESXi 6.0 server, I click on Update Manager. I attach the baseline we just created because we want this to be at version 6.5 standard. I click OK. Okay, and I don't know the compliance status. So the first thing to do is to scan for updates. So we scan the object, which is 192.168.0.202 ESXi host, for compliance, and I check it for upgrades. I click on OK, and a scan entity task starts up. It seems to be moving pretty quickly, but I will pause anyway and come back when it is complete. So that task, the scan entity task, completed, and the compliance status is now non-compliant. So what we need to do is to remediate this. So you can see here the current hypervisor is ESXi 6.0 and the baseline ESXi image is this. So I click on remediate. It's an upgrade. That's the baseline we created. The target is correct. I accept the license. I run it now. We've been through this before. If any virtual machines are on, power them off, and I think there are some. We will retry this a couple of times, 3 times in 5 minutes actually. And we are not worried about Pixie booted hosts here. I click on next. Remediation immediately. Upgrade baseline to vSphere 6.5 standard, and the target host is 202. Excellent. I click on finish, and the remediate entity process begins, which will start shutting down, powering off rather, the virtual machines, and then it will go into maintenance mode. You can see that the virtual machines have been powered off, the 2 virtual machines, as we had asked it to do. It then entered maintenance mode, and it is still going through its process. So after waiting about 20 minutes or so, we have here, this was the process of remediating the entity .202 that was completed. Scrolling up, you can see that it then, scroll down just a little bit, here we go. It scanned the entity and so on. It exited the maintenance mode. It powered on the virtual machines again. Here we go. And then both virtual machines were actually powered on, and this server was back again. If I look at the compliance status for this host, you can see that the compliance status is actually compliant. I look at summary, and the hypervisor is now version ESXi 6.5.0. So our upgrade using the update manager from ESXi version 6.0 has been successful. In this section, we took an extensive look at managing a vSphere 6.0 deployment and upgrading it to a version 6.5 deployment. In the next section, we will look at various tools that we have to troubleshoot a vSphere 6.x deployment. I look forward to seeing you there.